You may be familiar with the concept of Pokemon. I hope that you are. It may not be the most popular thing nowadays. When I was growing up, Pokemon was a very popular television show. And the idea is I'm going to use Pokemon to introduce objects and their methods. The concept of Pokemon is that you're collecting these different monsters, and each one has special abilities that come with it. They have these special abilities that they can use based on what type of monster they are. So this is very similar to the idea of objects in Java. All the different objects in Java have special methods that come with them, and the methods that they have depend on what type of object they are. So in this lesson, you're going to be learning about strings, and strings are a very special type of object which have a very special set of abilities that you can use to work with that string. These abilities are called methods or functions, and you're going to learn lots of them in today's lesson. So how do strings actually work in Java? Behind the scenes, when you're working with a string, the letters in that string are stored as individual characters. So that means that Java has actually created a space in memory to hold each individual character of that word and put them in order. And so that order means that each letter is given an address, or each character is given an address, and those addresses start at 0. The address number of each letter is called the index. So see in this example, the word string, S-T-R-I-N-G, actually starts at 0. So the 0th letter is S, and the last letter in string is at the 5th position. So I always say that when we start counting in computer science, we start at 0 and we end at length minus 1. That's going to make a little bit more sense once we talk about how you find the length of a string. So in order to find the length of a string, we actually have methods that are built into Java for us. Because strings are class data types, they have data and tools that we can use to manipulate, to read, and to work with the data that's in those strings. And we call these tools methods. That's sort of a Java-specific name, but sometimes you'll hear them called functions, or other times you'll hear them called commands. It sort of depends on the programming language, but in Java, we call these things methods. And all of the string methods that you have to work with, or that you need to know in this class, are actually listed in a reference sheet that you have called the Java Quick Reference Guide. And that Quick Reference Guide is going to be given to you on the day of the exam, or when you take the AP exam, because they want you to have that information available to you, and then the test is really about, can you use that information and apply what you know? So let's have a quick look at the Java Quick Reference Guide. As you can see, the Java Quick Reference Guide is a single sheet of paper, and it outlines all the methods and some of the constants and data types that are available to you and that you need to know for the AP exam. So I wanted to zoom in on the string section here. You'll notice that there's a definition here of how to construct a string, and then there are all these different methods that are given to you and that you're expected to know how to use when working with strings. So that's what we're going to go over in the rest of today's lesson. But just know that you always have access to this quick reference guide, and you should even save a copy for yourself or maybe print one out, because it's useful to have this to refer back to when you're working on string problems. The first string method we're going to look at in detail is one of the most common methods you're going to use when working on strings, and that's the .length method. So .length essentially tells us what is the length of a string. So if you have a string that has, say, 6 characters, this is going to return the number 6. It's also going to be returned as an int. Now, some important things to note here. The word is going to be the variable that you've used to store your string, and then this period here is called a dot operator. The dot operator is something that you're going to use many times in the future, anytime you want to call a method that a particular reference data type has access to. The second method I wanted to look at is dot equals. So dot equals is how we test if two strings are equal. Essentially, equals is going to test if the contents of both strings have the same characters in the same places. And then it's going to return true or false, right? Which you know is a Boolean value. So now let's head into some coding practice and see how we would use these two methods. You see here I've created one string called example, created a new string with the characters for the word variable, and then I'll create another string called example2 and set that equal to, let's call this string, sort of a self-referential name. And then we wanted to test out first using our string method .length to get the length of a string. So if you look at variable, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 letters in there. And so if we print out example.length, that should be telling us how many characters are in the word variable. If we run this, you see I've made a mistake here. Can never forget to have semicolons on the end of your statements. Now, if I've done everything correctly this time, we do in fact get a printout of 8. And so that's how .length works. It tells you the number of characters. It's important to note that it's not giving me 7, which is the index of the letter E. And that difference is going to be important in a minute in the next video when I show you how to use substring to get different characters. So remember that .length gives you the number of characters in the string. Okay, the other method I wanted to show you is using .equals. So in the example on the slide, .equals had empty parentheses, but in order to actually use this method correctly, in these parentheses we need to pass in example2, because basically the string that calls the method with the dot operator is being checked against the string that gets passed into parentheses. And we're going to learn more about this as we develop other methods and you start practicing with other methods, but for now, that's how you use .equals. And if we run this, well, variable and string are not the same thing. So our hope is that when we run this code, it should tell us false, and it does. And then if I change this to actually be string, and then try running our code, we now see that it's true because those in fact are now equal sets of characters. There are lots of other string functions we're going to play around with, but that's all for this video. Why don't you take some time now to play around and practice using .length and .equals to make sure you understand how they work.